Prayer is simply talking to God, but how do you talk to God so He hears you every time? You want to know something? It is so simple that a child who understands right and wrong could do it. And I'm going to show you how. This video is for you if you want to learn how to better handle issues in your relationship, your marriage, have better communication, experience more peace, exude more confidence, and encounter deeper intimacy. Then learning this simple framework about how to talk to God is a must. Now, I call this the ABC framework. When you learn this, you will realize how simple it is and you will want to do it often. Actually, you probably is going to get so hooked and addicted, if I can use that word, to want to pray and talk to God regularly, that it's going to be crazy. But not just to talk to God, but to also experience the results, peace, serenity, quiet heart, harmony in the home, harmony in your relationship. It's going to be amazing because prayer, according to the late Billy Graham, if you've never heard about him, it's not important, but he was one of the greatest evangelists of all times. And he said this: prayer is simply a two-way conversation between you and God. It's that simple. Here's what happened. Religion has complicated prayer, and some have used it, those religious leaders have used it to keep people in a state of dependency. And it irks me so much when I see some religion that not forces, but almost like creates a dependency kind of setting where people have to go to somebody, go to this person and that person to have their prayers answered or to have forgiveness. And I'm thinking, how sad when it is so much easier. It's easier. So you're going to discover a very simple framework that you can use to pray to God and pray so He hears. You're going to hear it in such a way that to say no to praying this way will make you feel stupid not to do it. Again, I didn't say you're stupid, but it make you feel that way. So let me first demystify a few things, right? Because this is important. It is a myth thinking that you need someone to pray to God for you. Jesus busted that myth by teaching us how to pray directly to God. He gave us a framework. He gave us an outline. He gave us what prayer should look like. And I'll talk more about that in a few moments. So the first myth is that thinking that you need someone to pray to or to go through to God other than Jesus is a myth. You don't need that. I'm going to show you how or why. It's also a myth thinking that you have to be in a special place or position to pray. Now, does it mean that you should not find a special place or be in a special position, like kneeling? No, I'm not saying that. I do that. There are times when I feel like when I want to just shut myself in to pray and I want to kneel, I want to feel like that posture, that position makes it so meaningful for me. And there's something about those moments, right? But it's not mandatory. Imagine some people who don't have a special place to retreat to have prayer or be in a position that they can get on a certain posture to pray. So what about them? Would their prayers not matter? So the Bible teaches that you can pray wherever and whenever you want to, right? Wherever you are and whenever you want to pray. Walking, running, in the shower, on the toilet, driving, wherever. Simply means wherever, right? So for example, sometimes I'm going to the gym and I'm on my bicycle because I live about a very short distance from the gym. So I sometimes ride my bicycle because the weather is so beautiful. And I will pray riding my bicycle. I have my headphones in, and I'm there and I'm praying. That's prayer, and God hears and God answers those prayer, just as He would if I was in a building or anything of that kind, right? So the third myth is, it's a myth thinking that you need special words to use to pray to God. As Billy Graham said, prayer is simply a conversation with God. A conversation with God. So prayer doesn't have to be complicated, right? It can be as simple as A, B, C, which is a framework we're going to talk about even right now. So here we go. The A stands for acknowledging, acknowledging. So when you are going to pray, so God hears and God answers every time, you want to first begin to acknowledge God, right? Acknowledge and recognize that God is present with you while you're praying. Recognize and acknowledge that God is sovereign. Sovereign simply means He's all powerful, all knowing, and He's everywhere, right? He is a being that transcends every other being. And that's why He's God. Acknowledge that He has a way that is beyond our ways, the way He does things. Just acknowledge His sovereignty and acknowledge the willingness to listen, that God is into conversating, talking to you. He speaks to your heart. And God speaks to us in three ways. Primarily, God speaks to us through to the Word of God, the Bible, right? So when you read the Bible, it's God speaking to you through the Bible. God also speaks to you through situations and circumstances, right? He uses those to speak to you as well. And then God speaks to you through people, right? So you have a pastor, a preacher, a teacher. He also uses those people, but sometimes He uses your spouse, your husband, your wife, and you want to be open to listen to that. In a relationship, God will speak to your partner, so you want to be open to that, because God uses those things and people to speak to our hearts, right? So acknowledging God is the first thing. The Bible said in Psalm 100, verse 3, it says, acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us, and we are His. We are His people, the sheep of His pasture. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. So you have to acknowledge that He is the God of the universe, right? And He is the only one who will answer your prayer. You have to have that certainty. When you listen to Tony Robbins, wow, what can I remember his last name? Tony Robbins speaks so much about certainty, having that certainty. And he's talking about the idea of believing so strong about certain things that you could feel it in your bones, so to speak. This idea of acknowledging that the Lord is God is one of certainty. You have to have that as a first place to begin, right? Because when you acknowledge it, again, you're acknowledging His presence and His sovereignty. And so when you begin with that in mind, that acknowledgement of God is where you get His attention. Imagine you're walking up to someone or talking to someone you haven't seen or spoken to for a while. You want to make sure you acknowledge that person, right? I would say, hey, how are you, man? How are you? What's up? Long time no see. What's going on in your world? That's acknowledging. I'm recognizing you. I'm letting you know that you are seen. You are a person. You are just not, a number. So I'm not going to overpass that moment to acknowledge you before I get into a conversation. So it is with God. He wants you to acknowledge Him at the very beginning. So that's the first thing, right? Acknowledging. The second thing is a B. So the B is believing. So whatever it is you have going on in your life, right? You have to believe that God will hear you and God will answer. Say, Kingsley, but I've done that and nothing has happened. Well, I don't think nothing has happened. It may not have happened the way you want to, but you have to trust that God knows all things and He knows better. He knows exactly what you need. So you're in a relationship and you're having some issues. I remember one time even in my own marriage, I've been married for 38 years and I have 2 adult children. And even though I work with couples and, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified relationship coach. So I have the training in communication. I have the years of experience in knowing and teaching people how to talk, how to communicate effectively, how to listen effectively, how to do all those skills, right? I teach that. But at times in my own life, I need to get wisdom, because I can have all those things, but I need to know the right time. I need to know the right way. And so I pray and I ask God for wisdom to know how to, when to. So I got to believe that He's going to give me. So it may not come the way that I think, but He does speak to my heart and nudge me in a certain way. And I have to believe that, because that's what faith is all about. Have faith and confidence in God's promises, in what God said He would do. Like, for example, He said He'll never leave me nor forsake me. I have to believe that. God says, ask and I'll receive. I have to believe that. God says, seek and I'll find. I got to believe that. God says, knock at the door and He'll open it. I have to believe that. I have to believe those things. He said, Kingsley, well, why do I need to believe those things? Well, my friend, you believe a lot of things in this world, right? You believe that when you sit on a chair, the chair is going to hold you up. You believe that when you get in the car is going to work and take you to the place you want to go. You believe that when you tell someone and give them your word, or they give you their word, you believe them, right? For the most part. So believing is something we do every single day. And God is saying we've got to believe that He is, and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. In Hebrews 11, verse 6, it says this: without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists, and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. So in your relationship, when you're having conflict, when you don't know how to communicate with your husband or your wife, when you are struggling with finding the right time, especially your husband is so busy and he is so much into his work, and you are feeling left out, you're feeling sad, or vice versa, you're feeling like a disconnect in your relationship, you're feeling like, I don't know what's going on. Listen, when you pray the way I'm describing here, you talk to God about those things like you talk to a friend, but you're acknowledging Him and you're believing that He does want to hear, He does want to answer. And listen, you're doing this to Him directly. You don't have to go to people I mentioned before. You are having this conversation with God as you would to a friend. The only difference is there's reverence, right? There's reverence and respect and honor, because God is who He is, beyond human being, beyond human nature. In Mark 11, verse 24, it says this: therefore I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. That's what Jesus said. So this believing is necessary. So whatever you're praying for in your relationship, in how to communicate, in how to solve a problem, in how to solve a conflict, in how to even get an answer to your need for intimacy, or even having children, right? You pray and speak to God, and God will answer, because He says He will do those things. But you have to have an acknowledgement of who He is, and you have to believe that He does want to answer. He does want to interact with you. He does listen to you, right? So when you're believing it's in God's power and promises, this is essential for effective prayer. This is a kind of prayer that God is hearing. This is a prayer that God is going to use to answer and give you the peace you're looking for in your heart, the peace you're looking for in your relationship, the peace you're looking for with your children, the peace when you're waiting on a very serious matter. Maybe it's a health issue in your relationship with your husband or your wife or your children, and you're worried, you're anxious. You want to be able to talk to God, like I'm suggesting here, and let God's peace that passes all understanding. It's a ridiculous, crazy peace that you can't even explain. Why are you feeling so peaceful? Because God hears that kind of prayer. Okay. You remember, I remember a few years back, I was having an open heart surgery. And when I heard that I'm going to be put under. And what I also have heard is that I signed a paper that the paper says, if I don't make it through, that I'm releasing the hospital from any kind of, damages as far as, financial and whatever else goes along with that. And I remember how my family, my wife and I, we prayed. I remember I had a peace, such a peace in my heart that whenever that night before my surgery, I said to my family who was there at the hospital, I said, I'm at peace. You guys can go home. There was tears in my eyes because I'm thinking like, I mean, what if I don't never see my family, my wife and my kids again? What if this is the last time I'm going to have a conversation with them? What if? But then when I prayed, I felt the peace of God that passes all understanding, that quieted my heart and allowed me to and able to rest that night and able to go through my surgery. I had a quadruple bypass surgery. It's a serious surgery. They had to split my chest open. Imagine that. But God gave me his peace. So I went through, the surgery was successful. And here I am on the other side of that. How many years later, as of this recording, that was in 2012. So it's 11 going on 12 years that this has happened. So that is what God does. When I acknowledged him and I believed he's going to give me his peace, I trusted him for that. Okay. And so this is where you're starting. So you're going to pray with what I call unwavering faith, trusting in God's ability to answer your prayers. And this is where you're going to go by faith, where you're not going to say, well, Kings, I'm not seeing anything change. That's walking by sight, my friend. The Bible said we do not walk by sight, we walk by faith. We have to use the lens of faith to trust and see God answering our prayers in our family, in our relationships, right? And again, as I'm talking to you about this, and you say, man, this is deep stuff. Yeah, it's deep, but it's really hopefully helping you as well. And you want to click that subscribe button to let me know and make a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are so far. What's your struggle? What's your struggle when it comes to prayer? What is a holdup? Where do you find yourself having the most difficult time? Let me know in the comment below. I'd love to have this conversation with you or any questions you may have in relation to this. But make sure you also hit that subscribe button as well. And I appreciate that. The last part is committing. Whenever you're about to do something, it's so important to commit. When I got married, I committed myself to my wife, and she likewise to me. That is a commitment that makes a difference. Here's what when I tell people, this may sound very radical, but I want you to listen to me, listen to this and really, bear with me for a second here, because this is radical thinking for some people, and it may offend you to hear what I'm about to say. The difference between a person who is married and people who are living together, the difference in what about this relationship and why people who live together and wonder why there's such a constant conflict. And you have conflict in marriage, I know that, but why there is this idea of how easy it is for a person to leave that relationship for someone else because somebody else came by that's prettier, more handsome, more money, more muscular, whatever the reason is, and your eyes begin to look there. Why is it that it's so much easier to leave that relationship when there's not married? Because there's not a commitment. The difference between a person who is in a marital relationship, now, does it mean that people who are in a marital relationship may not leave? Of course it would. I mean, this has happened, but it's a less chance. People who are committed to God are going to take that very seriously. And marriage is a commitment. So when you are committing to God in prayer, what you're simply saying is you're surrendering our requests and desires to God's will. It's so commitment, or committing in the ABC of prayer is simply saying, I want to surrender. When I make my prayers known and my requests known to God, when I act in believing that God hears me, I'm going to just trust that he does and surrender. It's almost like okay, God, is yours. I'm not going to worry more about it because it's in your hands. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to walk away from this moment of prayer and believe that you've heard me and you're answering my prayers. And I'm going to trust that. Okay. In Psalm 37, verse 5, it says this: commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. Psalm 37 verse 5. And it's really about the idea of believing and faith, right? So when we commit our prayers to God, again, it involves surrendering our desires, surrendering our concerns to God's will. It's surrendering that. So you're going to trust God's timing, which is not going to be necessarily like yours, and trust God's plans. God said in Jeremiah 29, verse 11, "For I know the plans I have for you, said the Lord, plans to prosper you and to give you a future," right? That's God's plans for you. And you have to believe and trust that. And so that's believing is so important. So acknowledging is important, but believing is like the meat. So imagine a sandwich, and the first layer is acknowledging. The B is believing. That's the meat of the prayer, right? And the C is committing this part to Him. This is the hard part, to walk away and believe that God is going to take care of whatever the situation is, right? So it's remain steadfast, remain in prayer, knowing, absolutely knowing, certainty, as Tony Robbins says, having the certainty, knowing that God hears and responds to your heartfelt petition. He knows what you're going through. He's not somehow unfamiliar with that. He knows that. So because you are now entering this ABC of prayer, acknowledging and believing and committing yourself to His will, this is where God gives you His peace. So it's almost like you take a deep breath, and now at the end of this, you say, "God, thank you." So you just thank Him. And when you do that, your prayer will transform, And you don't need any kind of flowery words to pray this prayer. Simply talk to God like you talk to a friend. So it could be like something like this: "God, this morning I'm really struggling with some issues, but I want to thank you for who you are. You're God, you're great, you're awesome. I'm so grateful to know that you have so much power, that nothing is impossible for you. I'm so thankful that I have a relationship with you through your son, Jesus Christ, and I can come and speak to you directly. And so thank you for inviting me into this prayer moment. I believe that God, what I'm going through right now with my family, with my children, with my wife, my husband, I believe, God, that you're going to answer. You're going to take care of it. You're going to allow my heart to be less anxious than it was this morning or last night. And because I believe that, I'm going to commit this to you. I'm going to commit this matter, my son, my daughter. I'm going to commit this, our financial situation, our health issue. I'm going to commit it to you, God, because you're the healer and you want me to rest in you. So with that said, God, I want to thank you for hearing my prayers, and for you to be there, and I can trust you. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Simple, right? Even a child who understands right from wrong, like I said, can do it. And my friend, listen, you will feel so stupid not doing this when you understand how simple this is. And you don't have to say the same thing every day. Don't repeat the same. Just have a conversation. Like if you were talking to me, you would not tell me the same thing every single day, would you? I don't think so. You want to have this ongoing conversation. As something comes up, just talk to God. Just talk to God in the way that I've described to you. And I believe that you will see the difference in that. And I believe that prayer makes a difference. And so I want to encourage you and challenge you to experiment with this idea. Experiment with this idea. And I believe that it will transform your relationship. It transform your relationship. And to know how I think about people who avoid these things, avoid prayer, but to jump into relationships without even praying and asking God about matters, and how to leave one relationship possibly because of a divorce, unfortunately, or a breakup or some of that kind. And I talk about how that rebounding idea can be very dangerous. And people who pray about those things can experience something very different, because God would give them their peace so they can wait. And I talk about that, how I believe that in this video right here, you'll see what I talk about Taylor Swift. Unfortunately, I believe that, I don't know her. I'm not going to judge her spirituality. I'm not going to judge if she's a person of prayer or not. I mean, I would say based on what I've seen and heard so far, I'm not sure she's following this ABC idea. But that's another story. I'm not going to be here to judge that. I'm just simply making an observation. But I believe that for her to have had these long-term relationships, like I described in this video, I think prayer would be very helpful for her before she's jump into another relationship and continue this pattern. So watch this and let me know what you're thinking. So thank you for subscribing and listening. And listen, I want you to make sure that you um, tell someone else, at least one person, about this video. And I would love to hear that. Thank you. And God bless you. See you on the other side.